So, Ratchet and Clank is back once again? Alright, I think it's time for a long overdue return to the series. It's crazy, the last time I looked at Ratchet and Clank was around the same time the PS4 game came out. Yeah, wow, that was a long time ago. But I always had intentions to review the rest of the series. I was just kinda waiting for the spark to revisit the games. And when there was rumors that a Ratchet and Clank game was getting revealed with the PS5, I tweeted out that if it happened, I would be doing another marathon, and lo and behold, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart gets announced. I had a feeling as soon as I tweeted out that was gonna happen, but hey, now's the perfect time to handle the next part of the series. But first I want to tackle two of the spin-offs, Size Matters and Secret Agent Clank. The only Ratchet games made for the PSP, or PlayStation Portable, and the only two Ratchet games not made by the original developers, Insomniac. Instead, it was handled by High Impact Games, which were comprised of former Insomniac and Naughty Dog members, which this was their first title for said company. Well, if you're gonna hand it off to anyone, it does make sense to give the franchise to people at least familiar with Insomniac's work. Well, it's definitely a Ratchet and Clank title. It's like the most basic of innuendos, but come on, that's a pretty great name, honestly. Fun fact, in Japan, this game is actually labeled as Ratchet and Clank 5. Though I think more fans would label that as Tools of Destruction, but one step at a time. You know, I never really played this one before the review. By the time I got around to playing the series, we were in the Future Saga by that point. So I played through all the PS2 games, headed straight to the PS3, and I didn't have a PSP at the time, so I saw no reason to pick it up. But I want to see if I was missing anything. I've heard mixed things on this game in the past, but I couldn't tell if those came from it being a portable Ratchet game and deemed not as good because of that, or the PS2 port. When I did the last marathon, you guys were adamant on saying for the PSP games to play them on their original platform, and not to play the ports to the consoles for large technical bugs and camera issues that made them the worst versions of the game. So don't worry, I'm gonna give these two next games the best shot they can. So does Size Matters hold up as a good Ratchet game on a portable system, or a good game in general? Only one way to find out, so let's get this marathon started. So the game begins with Ratchet and Clank relaxing on Pokataru when a young girl named Luna wants to get some pictures of Ratchet doing some heroics for her school project. Ratchet agrees to this, but when doing so, she is kidnapped by a group of robots. But the duo discovers a Technomite artifact left behind as a clue. They discover that the Technomites are a race of small creatures who were forgotten inventors. The two end up finding Luna and...
But I haven't had a chance to tell my friends about your heroic deed.
Wait, whoa, I'm sorry, what? So Luna ends up turning on them, and we see Ratchet has some kind of experiment done on him. Clank ends up rescuing Ratchet, and after exploring, the two find out Luna was merely a robot controlled by Technomites to lure Ratchet into a trap, so they could get his DNA to make an army of Ratchets. Yeah, that's what we're going with. The two make their way to a Technomite base, fight Otto, their leader, who reveals his plan was to use the army to find the most intelligent beings to have their knowledge transferred to him, so he'll be the smartest person in the universe? Huh? But Ratchet and Clank stop him and the day is saved. That is seriously all you're gonna get out of this story. I was debating on even having a spoiler bumper for this video, but there's so little in this game I didn't even bother. This is as basic and tiring of a plot as you can get, with vanilla villains that pose no threat of any kind or have any character. Like Otto, you see a grand total of 2 times in the whole game, and his whole Ratchet plan is all kinds of dumb, and I actively groaned when it was explained. And his whole intelligence plan makes no sense either. I guess he would make them surrender and force their intelligence onto him? If not, I just see them outsmarting him and taking the knowledge for themselves. This feels like a plan that's very easy to take advantage of. I thought Luna not being this innocent girl was the most interesting part of the story. I thought we were gonna get something like, say, the Batman animated series Baby Doll. You know, someone with the mind of an adult but trapped in a kid's body. That could have been an interesting villain for Ratchet, but as soon as it's shown that she's a robot, she goes full generic villain, which is honestly a shame. And I think a big problem is that the story is being told so straight, lacking that Ratchet and Clank charm, and with a plot this generic, I was not invested at all. And it doesn't help that the interactions are well below the series standard. Clank is pretty much his normal self, but Ratchet now is so much like this hyperactive kid who's impatient, rude to others, and kind of an idiot, honestly. I thought originally that this game took place after Ratchet 1 but before Ratchet 2, based on them being in Poketaro, his design being from Ratchet 1, so I was willing to give that a pass. But as soon as I saw Scrunch from Ratchet 3, and with that Japanese title, this is after Deadlocked. So now it feels really out of character for Ratchet to act this way, and it was honestly distracting. It doesn't help that the main two barely even feel like friends in this game, so most of their dialogue feels flat. And this includes Captain Quark as well, who I didn't even mention yet because he's such an afterthought here. He's trying to find out who his parents are, only to get tricked by Otto to thinking that he's Quark's father. But then it's shown that his parents were killed by Otto, but that's after the final boss, and such a background plot that goes nowhere. And it doesn't help that Quark has been demoted to a total idiot. And after Ratchet 3, where he was redeeming himself, that kinda rubs me the wrong way. And I know he isn't supposed to be the brightest, but it was more that his massive ego and need to be important got in the way of common sense for him. But here, it's nothing like that. Quark adds nothing to this. Overall, a totally forgettable story with nothing of value to save it. People debate whether Size Matters is even canon, but I don't really think it's that important when the game adds so little. To me, it makes no difference whether it is canon or not because there's nothing here, so it changes nothing. To get on a more positive note, the presentation for the PSP is honestly pretty great. This is Ratchet on a handheld alright, and graphically compares pretty well to the PS2 games. I really dug some of the locations like an ancient temple or a miniature garden city. These were pretty cool. Some areas you can see the limitations of the PSP come in, like the hallucination level. There's just a bunch of PNGs and it looks kinda bad honestly. But model quality is pretty good on everyone compared to the previous games. Except Ratchet. His arms and hands look so disproportionate to the rest of his body and it keeps weirding me out. Plus, his animations are certainly more cartoony than everyone else, but this makes Ratchet stick out like a sore thumb, because he moves and acts so differently from everyone else. Especially when Clank is on screen, because again, nothing feels that off about him. Sadly, you don't really interact with many characters on other planets. There are only like 3 in the whole game and that's about it. I mean, it is a smaller game, I get that, but with the series priding itself on these interactions on different planets, it feels a little lacking. One issue I do take with the game graphically is in the giant Clank sections because there are so many particles on screen that it's hard to tell what is what and it's visually confusing. It also hurts my eyes a lot, honestly, looking at it. The voice acting is good for the most part, but I gotta definitely say the voice direction felt all kinds of off. Though I'd say the script is also not helping with that too. I didn't laugh at all throughout the entire game. Like seriously, not a single joke landed, and that's pretty bad, honestly. But the soundtrack is good stuff too. Not quite amazing, but it gets that Ratchet PS2 vibe down with its sound. Right as I heard the soundtrack for Poketaru, it felt right at home, which is great. Though I did wish the sound didn't have to cut off every time you switched weapon, that kept taking me out of it. While having some rough edges here and there, for transitioning Ratchet and Clank to inferior hardware, I'd say they did a good job presentation-wise, but what about the gameplay? So Size Matters is pretty much what you expect. The weapon-using platform action of the main series now on a portable, but with all the benefits from Ratchet 3. You still grab bolts all over the place, you platform to the end, blowing up everything in your path with an assortment of weapons. Though weapons this time can only be upgraded to level 4, with extra mods being purchasable. What Size Matters brings to the table are armor sets. You'll find armor throughout the game that you can equip on the different parts of your body, and if you manage to find a full set, you can gain a new ability like your wrench being on fire and doing more damage. You got gadgets that you can use like the swing shot, working like how it did in Ratchet 3. The 2 new ones are the Sproutomatic, which can be used to make plants grow into contact-sensitive tools, and the Polarizer that can be used to move magnets. The whole size thing is only really used to explore small planets or to open doors. And you get it from the guy that you do races with, having very little fanfare for this game's main marketing point. It's so odd. But speaking of which, you do have races that you can partake in to get more bolts, your titanium bolts that can be used for skins like in Ratchet 3, Clank sections to guide robots, protect Ratchet, fly in space, and that's about it for the new in Size Matters. I mean, not too surprising considering the main goal was to get everything from PS2 Ratchet onto the PSP. So what's the good that came out of that? The best thing I can say for Size Matters is that it is a Ratchet game on the go that still have the same feel and vibe, of its console counterpart, which is a big deal. While I did have some adjusting that I need to do, I'll mention it in a bit, once I got settled in, everything was feeling right and I could enjoy myself. Probably the best level in the game is Ratchet's Dream, which is all kinds of bizarre, but memorable, and probably shows the best level design in the game, honestly. I really like how the door puzzles are you being shrunken down and have you doing grind rail sections. While I do enjoy the door puzzles from 1 and 2, I think this is a cool idea on how to do them, and take advantage of the size mechanic. And I actually really enjoyed the race sections this time. It's the standard hoverboard type, but with a cool twist. You can collect fuel that you can use to blast forward, and it lets you stay in the air taking shortcuts. Planning your route with how much fuel you have, this was really fun, and honestly, I think it's the most polished thing in the whole game. Which means it's time to get down into the nitty gritty. Size Matters has problems. Oh boy, it has problems. For one, the whole armor system just kind of falls flat, because the perks for the whole set aren't really that special, and it really just amounts to equip the parts that give you the higher number, making the entire system kind of useless, honestly. While it's close to the PS2 games, Ratchet does feel overall a bit more sluggish. His hover down takes forever, his wrench throw is so slow and basically impractical, but the biggest issue comes from the very console that this game was made for. The PSP lacks two big things from a DualShock: a second analog stick, and the L2 and R2 buttons. So what do they do for this game? Make strafing tied to the D-pad, and this terrified me at first, because in combat I'm basically almost always strafing. Thankfully, you can make strafing the analog stick in the menu, and I recommend you do that. It will make the game control a whole lot better. But the camera is now tied to the L and R button instead. So how do you do the crouch, long jump, and high jump? You hit both buttons at the same time, and this felt clunky, because it will either not activate, or I'll be in a long jump with the camera turning. And the long jump is kind of pathetic. You barely get any distance. I never use it. And it doesn't help that Clank, for whatever reason in this game, doesn't have the thruster pack. And the camera in general is always an issue in Size Matters. The thing is way too close to Ratchet, so most of the time you're barely able to see, let alone avoid attacks correctly, or platform vertically because you can barely see above or below you. Platforming in general is stiff and not responsive. The swing shot works fine, but maneuvers like the wall jump just feel like luck when they work. Your movement's feeling sluggish, and the camera issue could maybe get a pass if the combat also wasn't nerfed. For one, this is one of the weakest weapon lineups in the entire series. You've had variants of every one of these weapons before, or they're straight up taken from other games. The only two kind of neat ones are the acid bomb that leaves a puddle of toxic after it connects, and a laser you get at the very end that's very powerful, but you need to stand still in order to use it. But even then, the weapons in Size Matters barely do any damage, or just barely function at all. Your shotgun weapon takes forever to kill enemies when it's meant for crowd control. The Agents of Doom almost never fire shots and just stand there most of the time. Same goes for the high turret, like the enemy is right there, why aren't you firing? It's like 2 feet away from you! The suck cannon can't be used on anything in the second half of the game, and this game's design makes weapons like the sniper crossbow completely unusable. Bosses can drag, because even powered up weapons can barely do any kind of damage, even after modding them from the store. And almost all the weapons can't work on airborne fighters, nor can fight from long range, something that you need for 3 of the bosses, mind you. And on top of that, weapons also have very low ammo counts. Never in a Ratchet game have I had all my weapons run out of ammo this fast. And it was getting to the point where in the boss fights, I would have to take out my flamethrower and get right in front of the boss because I literally had nothing left. And the real kicker in all of this, you can barely dish out any kind of damage, but the enemies have no problem dishing out insane numbers to you. You die so fast in this game where you can barely do anything to hurt them, which leads to you playing a lot more defensive, which this control scheme will fight you for playing like that multiple times. Let's also talk about checkpoints, or rather the lack of. This game is stingy with them, and they're placed in really awkward spots. Usually they're placed around areas where you can't get money. This is important because when you blow through ammo after fighting a boss, you need to rebuy all your ammo. And since you can't really get bolts around the area, you do this enough and you're out of luck. Especially if you use the PDA returning from Ratchet 1, where ammo costs 5 times as much. I haven't seen bolt numbers this low since Ratchet 1, and the only way outside of exploration to get any kind of money is through the racing minigame. Yeah, there are no arenas this time to grind up for money or bulk up your weapons. Instead, we have this Clank Beyblade arena that's just X to win. Speaking of which, Clank is handled so weird in this game. He has count 'em, one normal section of his gameplay style. That also has the Ratchet 1 gadget bot problem where they don't follow you back if they die. So you'll have to go all the way back to grab them and then go all the way back to where you actually need them. Oh, come on. And Giant Clank sections go on forever as they're an auto-scroller that, again, are stingy with checkpoints. Mainly on this guy that you gotta do a 3-minute auto-scroller on to get to him, and it's just a mess. Also in the final boss, you're just suddenly doing the PS2 style of Giant Clank. Like, you don't do this at any point in the game, so it feels so thrown in last minute. And to go back to the checkpoint and money issues, the two biggest offenders of this are easily the Luna and auto fights. Luna's fight starts with like this 4-minute long auto-scroller where you need to dodge her bullets and walk in a straight line, then avoid rocks for another 2 minutes, and then you start the boss fight. By the way, the first time I did this boss, I spawned right in its hitbox and died. Lovely. Okay, let me redo the fight. I'm back before the auto-scroller? Excuse me? So every time you die, and considering it's a hard boss fight, you'll need to go through that every time you want to retry the boss. Oh, come on, why? Like, seriously, why? Every other Ratchet boss spawned you right before the fight, so why are we doing this now? And the boss's attacks are so badly telegraphed along with the damage problem that I mentioned before. I was so close on giving up on the game at this point. It was so badly done. And then we have the final boss auto, which, alright, let's get into this boss and... I'm sorry, what? One attack does half of my health? And keep in mind, I was rocking an armor that did 70% damage reduction, and he still did that much. It makes the shield generator basically required to beat him. And he has a shield that you basically need to keep destroying with weapons that barely do any damage. Oh, fun. You know, Drek was hard in the first game, but he's probably still the best boss in the entire series because he gave you a challenge, but it never felt impossible, and beating him feels really good once you figured him out. This guy, nah. His pattern isn't complex, and he's only hard because your weapons suck and he does an obnoxious amount of damage. And I swear his hitboxes feel really deceptive. And that money issue came into effect big time here. I had to keep reloading my save so I wouldn't have to grind for bolts, just to beat the game. You know, for the last few reviews I made, I kind of noticed that I've had very mixed feelings about games. Like, I couldn't really just say yes or no if the game was good. I had these very mixed feelings on them. Not the case with Ratchet and Clank Size Matters. It's pretty bad. Size Matters starts with a promise. It tells you that it's gonna be a nice portable adventure with Ratchet and Clank that might not be on the same level as the PS2 games, but a worthy adventure in its own right. But it quickly shatters that promise with unfair checkpoints, enemies that do ridiculous damage to you, but you have weapons that can barely do anything to them, insane difficulty spikes, and story and characterization that leave no impact. Some issues like the camera and controls I can maybe forgive because of the system they were working for, but when I see difficulty spikes this massive out of nowhere and boss fights designed this bad, that's not the PSP's problem anymore. We still got a lot of games to review, but Size Matters is easily one of the worst games in the franchise. I don't recommend it at all as a portable Ratchet game, a Ratchet game in general, or even just a game. Size does indeed matter, and this game comes up short. And that was Size Matters, ultimately just not a very good game, and this was deemed the better version of the game. I can't imagine what the PS2 version's like, but I'm not in any rush to find out. Unless there's some kind of stream series I'm doing or anything like that, I am not touching this one again, I can tell you that. But the same team did come together one more time to produce another title for the series, that being Secret Agent Clank. So, would they be able to make a good game this time? Only one way to find out, so I'll see you then.